Om. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om. Peace, 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 and thy blessed beneficence be unto us and all beloved beings everywhere. Hari Om Tat Sat. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday evening reading and discussion of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are barely begun. We're still in the introduction. We'll be at this for a long time yet, thank goodness, weather willing. Our reader is Haima Naidu, and so she will tell us where we are in the book, and she will begin the reading. But before that, is there anything left over from earlier readings and discussions that requires clarification, or is there some question that has arisen in your mind since we were together last? Or is there any comment you'd like to make from your own wisdom or experience about these things that we're reading, or any other aspect of spiritual life? All right, dears. Please, Haima,
Sure, Raj.
take us forward.
Okay. Good evening and namaste, everybody. And we are on page 53 on PDF. We finished Future Monks, so you will be somewhere in 40s in the book. And I'm going to start from Ram and Manomohan. That's where I will be starting right now.
Now, these are householder devotees,
Yes.
Ram and Manomohan.
Ram and Manomohan. The first two householder devotees to come to Dakshineshwar were Ramchandra Datta and Manomohan Mitra. A medical practitioner and chemist, Ram was skeptical about God and religion and never enjoyed peace of soul. He wanted tangible proof of God's existence. The master said to him, God really exists. You don't see the stars in the daytime, but that doesn't mean that the stars do not exist. There is butter in milk, but can anybody see it merely looking at the milk? To get butter, you must churn milk in a quiet and cool place. You cannot realize God by a mere wish. You must go through some mental disciplines. By degrees, the master awakened Ram's spirituality, and the latter became one of his foremost lay disciples. It was Ram who introduced Narendranath to Sri Ramakrishna. Narendra was a relative of Ram. Manomohan at first met with considerable opposition from his wife and other relatives, who resented his visits to Dakshineshwar. But in the end, the unselfish love of the master triumphed over worldly affection. It was Manamohan who brought Rakal to the master. Next, we are reading about Surendra. Suresh Mitra, a beloved disciple whom the master often addressed as Surendra, had received an English education and held an important post in an English firm. Like many other educated young men of the time, he prided himself on his atheism and led a bohemian life. He was addicted to drinking. He cherished an exaggerated notion about man's free will. A victim of mental depression, he was brought to Sri Ramakrishna by Ramachandra Datta. When he heard the master asking a disciple to practice the virtue of self-surrender to God, he was impressed. But though he tried thenceforth to do so, he was unable to give up his old associates and his drinking. One day, the master said in his presence, "Well, when a man goes to an undesirable place, why doesn't he take the Divine Mother with him?" And to Surendra himself, Sri Ramakrishna said, "Why should you drink wine as wine? Offer it to Kali and then take it as her prasad, as consecrated drink. But see that you don't become intoxicated. You must not reel your thoughts. You must not reel and your thoughts must not wander. At first, you will feel ordinary excitement, but soon you will experience spiritual exaltation." Gradually, Surendra's entire life was changed. The master designated him as one of those commissioned by Divine Mother to defray a great part of his expenses. Surendra's purse was always open for the master's comfort. Next, Kedar. Kedarnath Chatterjee was endowed with a spiritual temperament and had tried various paths of religion, some not very commendable. When he met the master at Dakshineshwar, he understood the true meaning of religion. It is said that the master, weary of instructing devotees who were coming to him in great numbers for guidance, once prayed to the goddess Kali, "Mother, I am tired of speaking to people. Please give power to Kedar, Girish, Ram, Vijay, and Mahendra to give them the preliminary instruction so that just a little teaching from me will be enough." He was aware, however, of Kedar's lingering attachment to worldly things and often warned him about it. Next, Harish. Harish, a young man in affluent circumstances, renounced his family and took shelter with the master, who loved him for his sincerity, singleness of purpose, and quiet nature. He spent his leisure time in prayer and meditation, turning a deaf ear to the entreaties and threats of his relatives. Referring to his undisturbed peace of mind, the master would say, "Real men are dead to the world, though living." Look at Harish. He's an example. When one day the master asked him to be a
Please read that again.
Sure.
Real men are.
Real men are dead to the world, though living. Even though they're living, they're dead to the world. That's what he meant.
Yes.
Yes. Real men are dead to the world, though living. Look at Harish. He's an example. When one day the master asked him to be a little kind to his wife, Harish said, "You must excuse me on this point. This is not the place to show kindness." if I try to be sympathetic to her, there is a possibility of my forgetting the idea and becoming entangled in the world. Bhavanath is the next person. Bhavanath Chatterjee visited the master while he was still in his teens. His parents and relatives regarded Sri Ramakrishna as an insane person and tried their utmost to prevent him from becoming intimate with the master. But the young boy was very stubborn and often spent nights at Dakshineshwar. He was greatly attached to Narendra, and the master encouraged their friendship. The very sight of him often awakened Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual emotion. Next person is Balaram Bose. Balaram Bose came of a wealthy Vaishnava family. From his youth, he had shown a deep religious temperament and had devoted his time to meditation, prayer, and the study of the Vaishnava scriptures. He was very much impressed by Sri Ramakrishna, even at their first meeting. He asked Sri Ramakrishna whether God really existed, and if so, whether a man could realize him. The master said, God reveals himself to the devotee who thinks of him as his nearest and dearest. Because you do not draw response by praying to him once, you must not conclude that he does not exist.
Please read that again.
Yes, I will. Balaram Bose came of a wealthy Vaishnava family. From his youth, he had shown a deep religious temperament and had devoted his time to meditation, prayer, and the study of the Vaishnava scriptures. He was very much impressed by Sri Ramakrishna, even at their first meeting. He asked Sri Ramakrishna whether God really existed, and if so, whether a man could realize him. The master said, God reveals himself to the devotee who thinks of him as his nearest and dearest.
This is one of the master's key principles.
Yes.
That we are to think of the divine being, though infinite, eternal, and changeless, within time, space, and causation, as an avatar or a this God, this personal God. Think of that personal God as your nearest and dearest. Think of them as you would think of the most dear person to you. And Sri Ramakrishna says, over and over, he says in the gospel, as we read along, we'll see that this is a very easy way to penetrate the veil that covers the divine being by this intense love for the near and dear. So this is, as I say, one of the master's key principles. The personal God is to be known, and it can be realized. This is what he told Balaram. Think of him as your nearest and dearest. Think of him as your near and dear. Any comments or concerns or questions about that particular aspect? Okay, dear. Please read on.
Uh-huh. The master said, God reveals himself to the devotee who thinks of him as his nearest and dearest. Because you do not draw response by praying to him once, you must not conclude that he does not exist. Pray to God, thinking of him as dearer than your very self. He is much attached to his devotees. He comes to a man even before he is sought. There is none more intimate and affectionate than God. Balaram had never before heard God spoken of in such forceful words. Every one of the words seemed true to him. Under the master's influence, he outgrew the conventions of the Vaishnava worship and became one of the most beloved of the disciples. It was at his home that the master slept whenever he spent a night in Calcutta. Next person is Mahendra.
Hold on just one moment.
Sure, Brother Shankara.
You can visit Balaram Bose's house. It's now
Really?
in the possession of the Ramakrishna order, but you can go on pilgrimage there and actually sit in the room where Sri Ramakrishna slept when he was there, and be in the places where he played with the children, and it's really quite a remarkable experience. When I visited India in 1999, the home was still in the possession of the family, but Ramakrishna's children, his disciples, were most welcome there. And so we were taken there by our guide, and it was a real highlight of our stay in Calcutta, Balaram Bose's house. So if you're ever in India, please, and you go to Calcutta, make sure that there are two places that there are many places, of course, but two in particular, Balaram Bose's house and Mahendranath Gupta's house, M, that is also now in the possession of the order. And it again is a real place of pilgrimage. And sincere devotees who are most welcome there, and the people who are in charge tell you everything that they know about the place if you'll sit and listen. And there's lots to know about both places. Anything at all from anyone else about any of that? All right, dear, please read on.
Next person is Mahendra or M. Mahendranath Gupta, known as M, arrived at Dakshineshwar in February 1882. He belonged to the Brahmo Samaj and was headmaster of the Vidyasagar High School at Sam Bazar, Calcutta. At the very first sight, the master recognized him as one of his marked disciples. Mahendra recorded in his diary Sri Ramakrishna's conversations with his devotees. These are the first directly recorded words in the spiritual history of the world of a man recognized as belonging in the class of Buddha and Christ. The present volume is a translation of this diary. Mahendra was instrumental through his personal contacts in spreading the master's message among many young and aspiring souls. Next person is Nag Mahashe. Durga Charan Nag, also known as Nag Mahashe, was the ideal householder among...
Nag Mahashe.
Is it Nag? Okay. Nag Mahashe, Durga Charan Nag, also as Nag Mahashe, was the ideal householder among the lay disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. He was the embodiment of the master's ideal of life in the world, unstained by worldliness. In spite of his intense desire to become a sannyasi, Sri Ramakrishna asked him to live in the world in the spirit of a monk and the disciple truly carried out this injunction. He was born of a poor family, and even during his boyhood, often sacrificed everything to lessen the sufferings of the needy. He had married at an early age, and after his wife's death had married a second time to obey his father's command. But he once said to his wife, "Love on the physical level never lasts. He is indeed blessed who can give his love to God with his whole heart. Even a little attachment to the body endures for several births. So do not be attached to this cage. So do not be attached to this cage of bone and flesh. Take shelter at the feet of the mother and think of her alone. Thus your life here and hereafter will be ennobled." The master spoke of him as a blazing light. He received every word of Sri Ramakrishna in dead earnest. One day he heard the master saying that it was difficult for doctors, lawyers, and brokers to make much progress in spirituality. Of doctors, he said, if the mind clings to the tiny drops of medicine, how can it conceive of the infinite? That was the end of Durga Charan's medical practice, and he threw his chest of medicines into the Ganges. Sri Ramakrishna assured him that he would not lack simple food and clothing. He bade him serve holy men. On being asked where he would find real holy men, the master said that the sadhus themselves would seek his company. No sannyasi could have lived a more austere life than Durgacharan. Next person is Girish.
Hold on just one moment.
Sure, Brother Shankara.
This last statement, read that last sentence again.
Yes.
Just the last sentence.
Last sentence only. On being asked where he would find real holy men, the master said that the sadhus themselves would seek his company. No sannyasi could have lived a more austere life than Durgacharan.
This was Holy Mother held Nagmashai in this respect, in her highest regard, because just as it says here,
Yes.
no sannyasin could have lived a more exemplary, a simple and straightforward life of spiritual effort, spiritual, the desire and effort to realize God. This is, if you read the life of Nagmashai, it is really, it'll just, it'll seem to you, how can anyone actually live this way? And yet that's what he did. And Mother said he was exemplary and entirely unusual. So any comments or concerns or questions? All right, dear, please.
This Nag Mahashaya is the one, I think when I think from one of the direct disciples went to his house in the night, he didn't, it was a winter time. He was ready to take out one of the main pillars of his house, which is dry wood, to burn and to keep them warm.
Yes, well, this is just an example.
Yeah.
So, this is no material thing was of any significance to him if there was some reason to sacrifice it. Thank you, Vala. All right, dear.
Next person is Girish Ghosh.
Oh my.
Very popular person. Girish Chandra Ghosh was a born rebel against God, a skeptic, a bohemian, a drunkard. He was the greatest Bengali dramatist of his time, the father of the modern Bengali stage. Like other young men, he had imbibed all the vices of the West. He had plunged into a life of dissipation and had become convinced that religion was only a fraud. Materialistic philosophy he justified as enabling one to get at least a little fun out of life. But a series of reverses shocked him, and he became eager to solve the riddle of life. He had heard people say that in spiritual life, the help of a guru was imperative, and that the guru was to be regarded as God himself. But Girish was too well acquainted with human nature to see perfection in a man. His first meeting with Sri Ramakrishna did not impress him at all. He returned home feeling as if he had seen a freak at a circus. For the master in a
Please read that again. I missed
yes,
the word.
yes, his first meeting with Sri Ramakrishna did not impress him at all. He returned home feeling as if he had seen a freak at a circus.
Aha.
For the master, in a semi-conscious mood, had inquired whether it was evening, though the lamps were burning in the room. But their paths often crossed, and Girish could not avoid further encounters. The master attended a performance in Girish's Star Theatre. On this occasion, too, Girish found nothing impressive about him. One day, however, Girish happened to see the master dancing and singing with the devotees. He felt the contagion and wanted to join them, but restrained himself for fear of ridicule. Another day, Sri Ramakrishna was about to give him spiritual instruction when Girish said, "I don't want to listen to instructions. I have myself written many instructions. They are of no use to me. Please help me in a more tangible way if you can." This pleased the master, and he asked Girish to cultivate faith. As the time passed, Girish began to learn that the guru is the one who silently unfolds the disciple's inner life. He became a steadfast devotee of the master. He often loaded the master with insults, drank in his presence, and took liberties which astounded the other devotees. But the master knew that at heart, Girish was tender, faithful, and sincere. He would not allow Girish to give up the theater. And when a devotee asked him to tell Girish to give up drinking, he sternly replied, "That's none of your business. He who has taken charge of him will look after him. Girish is a devotee of heroic type. I tell you, drinking will not affect him." The master knew that mere words could not induce a man to break deep-rooted habits, but that the silent influence of love worked miracles. Therefore, he never asked him to give up alcohol, with the result that Girish himself eventually broke the habit. Sri Ramakrishna had strengthened Girish's resolution by allowing him to feel that he was absolutely free. One day, Girish felt depressed because he was unable to submit to any routine of spiritual discipline. In an exalted mood, the master said to him, "All right, give me your power of attorney. Henceforth, I assume responsibility for you. You need not do anything." Girish heaved a sigh of relief. He felt happy to think that Sri Ramakrishna had assumed his spiritual responsibilities. But poor Girish could not then realize that he also, on his part, had to give up his freedom and make of himself a puppet in Sri Ramakrishna's hands. The master began to discipline him according to this new attitude. One day, Girish said about a trifling matter.
Trifling.
Yes, trifling. One day, Girish said about a trifling matter, "Yes, I shall do this." "No, no," the master corrected him. "You must not speak in that egotistic manner. You should say, 'God willing, I shall do it.'" Girish understood. Thenceforth, he tried to give up all idea of personal responsibility and surrender himself to the divine will. His mind began to dwell constantly on Sri Ramakrishna. This unconscious meditation in time chastened his turbulent spirit.
Chastened.
Okay. This unconscious meditation in time chastened his turbulent spirit. The householder devotees generally visited Sri Ramakrishna on Sunday afternoons and other holidays. Thus, the brotherhood was gradually formed, and the master encouraged their fraternal feeling. Now and then, he would accept an invitation to a devotee's home where other devotees would also be invited. Kirtan would be arranged, and they would spend hours in dance and devotional music. The master would go into trances or open his heart in religious discourses and in the narration of his own spiritual experiences. Many people who could not go to Dakshineshwar participated in these meetings and felt blessed. Such an occasion would be concluded with a sumptuous feast. But it was in the company of his younger devotees, pure souls yet unstained by the touch of worldliness, that Sri Ramakrishna took greatest joy. Among the young men who later embraced the householder's life were Narayan, Paltu, the younger Narayan, Tej Chandra, and Purna. These visited the master sometimes against strong opposition from home. That's the end of Girish Ghosh. We're moving on to Purna next.
Okay, let's notice that this is the longest narration of any of the narrations about the householder devotees. And this is paralleled by the fact that the biggest book that Swami Chaitanananda wrote about any of the householder devotees is about Girish Ghosh. He is just an absolutely compelling personality. This is just a brief sketch of him, but Swami Chaitanananda's book is nearly 3 inches thick, and no other book that he ever wrote about any of the devotees was anywhere near that size. Whether it be the householders or the people or the young men who later became monks. Many of them Chaitanananda wrote books about. None of them in such great detail as he did about Girish. This was a remarkable creation of a saint from this bohemian character, this man who was totally devoted to dissipation. And yet at the end of his life, he was recognized as one of the greatest saints among the master's disciples. And the young monks who came to the order would be sent to him for stories about the master and for instruction by him. The young men who were becoming monks, they would be sent to Girish Ghosh. And he was a great favorite of Rakal Maharaj, Swami Brahmananda. When he was president of the order, he spent time with Girish Ghosh, one of the few people that he went out from Belrumat and spent time in their homes. So this is a remarkable human being. We'll hear much more about him as time goes on reading the gospel itself. Anything else from anyone about any of that, or anything else of your that catches your interest?
I read a little bit more about Girish Ghosh, Brother Shankara, not the book yet. And he turned his life 360 degrees around. I think better side up, up. I wouldn't say downside up, upside, not upside down. It's a better side up. He really turned his life. It was amazing, amazing.
Yes.
I recommended this book to one of my family members. I see some change. I see Girish Ghosh's life. I asked that person to read some time back. Now I see some change in that person. I never asked him whether he read it or not, but I just see the change. So I feel something really did happen. Something he
Well,
made
this is the thing.
amazing.
When we say that Girish turned his life around,
He did.
this is after he gave his power of attorney to the master. It was the master
Master turned his life.
completely transformed his life.
Yes,
Completely. And he did it by the power of love
I agree.
and attraction,
Yeah.
not by compulsion or discipline.
Yes.
And this is one of the reasons that Girish is such a remarkable example of the master's ministry.
He developed faith in Master. Slowly, he was so rebellious in the beginning, and he started developing faith in him, trust in him, and he surrendered to him totally.
Well, that's it didn't make much of a point of it when we were told that he had given the power of attorney to the master, but it says he heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't realize that now. It said he didn't realize that his freedom was at an end. But this is most profoundly true. This is what I mean when
It is.
we say the master took him because Girish had this love in his heart and this faith, because he gave his power of attorney to the master. The master took him and turned him into the most bona fide saint.
He sure is.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
I have a question.
Yes, dear.
So when Girish gave up the power of attorney to Sri Ramakrishna and quote unquote lost his freedom, I'm thinking that because of that, if Girish had a inclination towards some of the harmful things to himself that he was engaged in before, even without his will, it would the Sri Ramakrishna would kind of turn him to the right direction. Is that sort of the way to take the fact that he lost
Yes,
his
but
freedom?
through the power of love and attraction. For example, Girish did not immediately stop drinking when this happened with the master. But one of the things that he noticed when he would tip up his wine glass and empty his wine glass, he would see the master's face in the bottom of the wine glass. the master, and alive, not a still picture, the master smiling and looking at him lovingly. And of course, this was, what a powerful experience that would be. So this experience of Girish Ghosh, it's way too complicated for us to go into entirely tonight. We'll hear a lot about it in bits and pieces as we read the gospel. But as I said, Swami Chaitananda pulled it all together in that book. And if you're curious about what it means to take spiritual responsibility for someone and become truly their guru, that is to say, the remover of their darkness and ignorance, this was the relationship between Sri Ramakrishna and Girish Ghosh.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. So that book by Swami Chaitananda, like the kind of examples of incidences that you just talked about?
Oh, many, many, many. Like I said, it's a very thick book and goes into great detail. But yes, incidences like I just mentioned, are in that book, and many, 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 many more.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
You're welcome.
Can you tell me the name of the book, the title?
It's just Girish Ghosh.
Okay.
Yeah, and the author is Swami Chaitananda, who is now still serving as the president and head minister of the Vedanta Society of St. Louis.
Thank you.
You can buy that book from their bookshop, or you can also, of course, get it from Vedanta.com.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Hi, this is Shailesh, everybody.
Yes,
Brother.
Shailesh.
Connecting, so some information which I just wanted to share this thought and my understanding about Girish Ghosh, because like what you said, Brother Shankara, is quite difficult to understand. So in Hinduism, we have 32 crore gods, and out of those, 10 crores are the Bhairavas, which are attendants of Shiva, they say. And Ramakrishna Thakur, he had a vision that Girish Ghosh was attendant of Lord Shiva. He was a Bhairava.
Yes.
And so, from my understanding, Girish Ghosh is already a god. He was a god incarnated as a human being, but being a Bhairava. Now, the Bhairava is, if you go in villages, every village in India, especially the warrior caste, which I belong, we have a Bhairava. The village god is a Bhairava. So these are rough gods. That's how they are. Like, they are offered wine and their inspiration when they are part of a war cry. So my understanding is that Girish Ghosh was already a god, and he was way up there. But it was a divine play of Sri Ramakrishna to make him part of his divine play and bring him down with him. And so to follow his footprints, or to understand his life and try and say that, oh, my understanding is that basically he was not an ordinary human being to overcome all this. That's how I see it.
No.
That's my understanding.
Thank you, Shailesh. You're absolutely right. And we can say that none of the intimate disciples, none of the inner circle of Sri Ramakrishna's uh, disciples, that inner circle, that most intimate group, were ordinary human beings. They were not. They were special human beings that came with the master for a particular purpose. This is our understanding, and we'll discover that. that will be revealed to us as we read the gospel, that all of these people came in one way or another to serve with the master in his mission, which was to unchain us and set us free. And so there, all of these people, Girish and all, they all have their role to play in creating what we're doing this evening. Here we sit on a Tuesday evening reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which was created by Mahendranath Gupta, who was himself, according to Sri Ramakrishna, a very old saint who was one of Sri Chaitanya's. He said, I saw you as part of Sri Chaitanya's party, which means that he was an inner part of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's inner circle. And so, these are not ordinary human beings. You're absolutely right. And of course, Girish is most extraordinary. Otherwise, Chaitanananda would not have written that great big book. I mean, he wrote books about virtually all of the monastic and householder disciples. Not each one individually. Sometimes they were gathered together. God lived with them, they lived with God, and so on. But these were extraordinary people. And as you say, Sri Ramakrishna had a vision of him as a Bhairava who had become demonic in his nature. And this is why he was behaving the way he did in this lifetime, in the lifetime we know of. Thank you, Shailesh.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Anything else from anyone?
Yes, brother, this is Jeff.
Yes, Jeff.
I was thinking about the fact that the plays that Girish wrote and produced in his theater were, as I understand it, pretty much always on religious themes like Ramayana and what have you. And I wonder if, on one hand, that is his choice because of his divine nature, even though he wasn't aware of it at the time, or was it just the fact that that's how things were done at that time in India, because that's what the culture was like and what the culture expected. So
Yes, both the things you said are true, but it is definitely the latter is the truth. But Girish's plays, he wrote them because they were on these religious themes, which were very popular with the people. But they were extraordinary. They were not in any way ordinary dramas. This is why he's known as the father of the modern Bengali theater. Sri Ramakrishna praised his work extravagantly. He said, "This is like the reality itself." When the play would be performed, this is the way it actually was, and so. But yes, Girish was writing what would draw people to his theater. He had theaters; he needed to support them, so he wrote those things. And he wrote not only those kind of plays, but he also wrote some comedies and things that the master really kind of gently scolded him for writing. He said, first you give us, butter and cream, and then you give us sour milk. And so so this is Girish, as I said. We could go on talking about Girish Ghosh for the rest of the night and not even begin to scratch the surface of this amazing, as Shailesh pointed out, not exactly a regular human being, for something far more than that. So Jeff, you're absolutely right. You know, he did write that which would draw people to the theater, but what he wrote was extraordinary. It was really, really good, and betrayed this deep intuitive understanding of this Bhairava, this Shiva worshiper that understood these spiritual aspects and could write about them. The songs that he wrote, Sri Ramakrishna, those oftentimes the songs would not have been being sung for very long before Sri Ramakrishna would go into samadhi. So that's how powerful those songs were. Anything else from anyone? Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Jeff, for bringing this forward. Anything else from anyone? So you can see how much Girish Ghosh deserves our attention by how much attention we've given to him during this time. And as I said, during the latter part of his life, he was a transformative power for people who came into his presence. His radiance as a saint was transformative for people who came into his presence. And this is the thing about a saint. As Swami Prabhupada would say, religion is not taught, it is caught. It is like lighting one candle from another. It is like handing a person a piece of fruit. He said, religion in the hand of a saint is like a fruit that they can give to you, and when you partake of it, it is transformative. So this is the nature, and it's the nature to one degree or another of all of the masters in our circle of disciples. As we read about them, as we go through the gospel, you'll see that every one of them became this truly remarkable and truly transformative. When they touched the lives of others, they were sharing the Master's power and glory because they had come with him to manifest it. They had come. He called them his band of minstrels, his inner circle of devotees. He called them his band of minstrels. And they were the ones who sang the songs and played the instruments, so to speak, to create the music of Sri Ramakrishna's incarnation. It wasn't just him by himself. Anything else from anyone before we read on? Okay, dear, please.
Okay. Next person is Purna. Purna was a lad of 13 whom Sri Ramakrishna described as an Ishvara Koti, a soul born with special spiritual qualities. The master said that Purna was the last of the group of brilliant devotees who, as he once had seen in a trance, would come to him for spiritual illumination. Purna said to Sri Ramakrishna during their second meeting, "You are God himself incarnated in flesh and blood." Such words coming from a mere youngster proved of what stuff the boy was made. Next person, Mahimacharan and Pratap Hajra, two people. Mahimacharan and Pratap Hajra were two devotees outstanding for their pretentiousness and idiosyncrasies. But the master showed them his unfailing love and kindness, though he was aware of their shortcomings. Mahimacharan Chakravarti had met the master long before the arrival of the other disciples. He had had the intention of leading a spiritual life, but a strong desire to acquire name and fame was his weakness. He claimed to have been initiated by Totapuri and used to say that he had been following the path of knowledge according to his guru's instructions. He possessed a large library of English and Sanskrit books. But though he pretended to have read them, most of the leaves were uncut.
Now, this is, we need to understand what this means. In the days of that M is writing about here, uh, when books were published, they each leaf wasn't loose as it is now.
Mhm.
You had to cut. You had to take what we would call a letter opener
Yeah.
or scissors and actually cut the leaves. Cut them apart so that the leaves would, you could turn each page on its own. This is what it means that this is what she just read. So he had this large library of books, but most of them had never even been opened, let alone read. So it was part of his pretentiousness.
Mhm.
So please read that little bit again, please.
Yes. He claimed to have been initiated by Totapuri and used to say that he had been following the path of knowledge according to his guru's instructions. He possessed a large library of English and Sanskrit books. But though he pretended to have read them, most of the leaves were uncut. The master knew all his limitations, yet enjoyed listening to him recite from the Vedas and other scriptures. He would always exhort Mahima to meditate on the meaning of the scriptural text and to practice spiritual discipline. Pratap Hazra, a middle-aged man, hailed from a village near Kamarpukur. He was not altogether unresponsive to religious feelings. On a moment's impulse, he had left his home, aged mother, wife, and children, and had found shelter in the temple garden at Dakshineshwar, where he intended to lead a spiritual life. He loved to argue, and the master often pointed him out as an example of barren argumentation. He was hypercritical of others and cherished an exaggerated notion of his own spiritual advancement. He was mischievous and often tried to upset the minds of the master's young disciples, criticizing them for their happy and joyous life and asking them to devote their time to meditation. The master teasingly compared Hazra to Jatila and Kutila, the two women who always created obstructions in Krishna's sport with the gopis, and said that Hazra lived at Dakshineshwar to thicken the plot by adding complications.
Now this is you see how the master doesn't criticize.
Yes.
He accepts everything, and but he just says, this is the role he's come to play, to thicken the plot and create complications. And so, it was a kind of dark side fun. Hazra really was a character. We'll learn a lot about him in the gospel. He really was a character. He would sometimes pretend to be the master. People would come to Dakshineshwar to see the master, and they would say, well, where's the holy man? And he'd say, well, I am he. And, this is how remarkably self-centered and pretentious he was. But, as the master said, he came to thicken the plot and create complications. So I think we're going to have to leave it there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's almost time, Brother Shankara. 6:30. I mean, my time 6:30, your time 8:30. Sorry.
Yeah.
So it's,
So
it's,
let's
we'll
leave it there. We'll
Sure.
pick it up there next week.
Okay.
And it's interesting that we're leaving on the note of Hazra,
That's
and
right.
we'll pick it up next week as
Okay.
Hazra, because we're thickening the plot and being and creating complications in our own lives.
That's right.
So anything at all? Any last thought from anyone before we close? All right, dears. Oh, dearly beloved, a flower at thy feet for each one who comes to your open door. A flower at your feet for each one who stands by your open door and says, come to me, offering to break this world's chain that binds us down to ignorance, suffering, and death. A flower at your feet for each brave soul that takes the path that you have struck through this, your jungle world. Om Hari Om, Om Hari Om, Om Hari Om Tat Sat. Oh, dearly beloved, dearly beloved, make it so. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga Durga Durga. May we be safe, may we be healthy, may we be cheerful, may we have peace of mind, and may we go forward secure in the knowledge that we are in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, 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 and thy blessed beneficence be unto all beloved beings everywhere. Any final thought from anyone? All right.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Well, here we go. Until tomorrow night when we'll study the Gita with Swayam as our reader. And then Saturday when we study the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras as the workbook, How to Know God. And then the last talk on Bhakti Yoga for this month, June being a month that we've studied Bhakti Yoga. And the title of that talk is A Bhakta of Strong Heart, Vivekananda. Vivekananda, Narendranath Datta, who became Vivekananda, what a soul he was. Again, one of the Ishvara Kotis, as Sri Ramakrishna said, those who come with the divine being with a very special role to play. And of course, Vivekananda's was to offer himself in sacrifice as a missionary to the West and completely burn up his body by age 39. So and of course, one of the reasons for doing Vivekananda right at the end of this month is that July 4th is coming up. And on July 4th, we will have our regular July 4th celebration here at the center. And of course, that is centered on the life of Vivekananda, who very deliberately left the body on July 4th, 1902. Any final thought from anyone? All right, away we go, dears. A great good night to you.